Hey guys, Pangolin Panther here, and today I've gotten a member request for the F-15E Strike Eagle, so let's take a look at how it does. Flight performance, it's quite solid. It's obviously not the best dogfighter out there, but it has some very powerful engines that produce a lot of thrust, letting it accelerate very well and reach very high speeds. I don't think it can quite keep up with Eurofighters and Rafales, but it's still the next best thing. What's also nice is that it also turns fairly alright at high speeds too. It's obviously going to compress and be worse than at medium speeds, but it's still decent enough that notching from past 10 kilometers doesn't feel like too much of a hassle. Plus, you can lower speed if you need to improve your turn. And the low speed turn is not as bad as I expected. It is still an F-15, so it's not that great in a dogfight, but it's still manageable enough that I was able to have some decent jousts, and overall was pretty comfortable to fly as long as I didn't find myself in low speed dogfights. Next, the radar. It's okay. It has some strengths, but also some weaknesses. It's about the same as the one on the F-15C MSIP2 or the F-15JM, except it gets a few extra modes for ground target search and track since it is a strike aircraft. For its strengths, it scans fairly quickly for a mechanical radar, and it works well enough that in regular TWS I never really bothered to switch to TWS head-on. And as for its downsides, it's still a mechanical radar, so it takes time to scan, time to pick up targets, and then more time to get an actual accurate heading. It does the thing where upon first scan it shows you where the target is but doesn't properly register the direction they're heading, so it creates a bit of desynchronization that gets a little annoying, but that is pretty standard for most mechanical radars. Its TWS scan modes are also not my favorite. It gets a wide but short scan, a really thin but somewhat taller scan, and then one in the middle, which is the one that I mainly use. Because the wide scan takes too long to come back to scan the same area again and update the contact on the radar, I find the narrow but taller one more useful, but this also means that you lose out on a significant amount of situational awareness, since you can't really see what's outside of that scan zone. This also means that if you try to lob multiple missiles out at once, it's difficult to data link them all in because you have to choose between wide scan that doesn't update very often, so risks losing soft lock for the data link, or the narrow scan, which is easier for the enemies to passively break soft lock just by exiting the scan area and flying in different directions. And while the TWS works well enough for spotting people within the scan area and scans at a decent speed, it's still not quite good enough to consider reliable for data link, and hard lock is still more consistent for that. It can work sometimes if the enemy only stays in the notch briefly and doesn't chaff as much as they need to, but again, it's not consistent enough that I would want to risk wasting one of my missiles for that chance. Not ideal, since if you are hard-locking the enemy to data link, it's going to reduce your situational awareness even further as you focus the target that you've now alerted with your RWR pings. Its radar horizontal limits are also plus or minus 60 degrees left and right, which is just about the bare minimum for 4th gen. I would have liked it if it were at least 70 degrees to hold locks while preparing for notches, or needing to pull in less for jousts. And the TWS does not get NCTR target ID, and even with hard lock you only get the identifiers of multi-jet or jet, so no actual identification of the enemy. It's at least good for filtering out chaff, missiles, and other non-airplane contacts, but this is again another limitation on its situational awareness. So overall, it's an okay radar, functional and workable, and not actively a hassle to use like the ones on the early Russian 4th gens, but it's still not quite enough to let you fly into any situation with full awareness of where the threats are and where they're going. And it's also not quite as good at consistently data linking against notching enemies when compared to other better mechanical radars like the Gripen C or the ASA radars that are found on more advanced jets. Still, I do think I like it a lot more than the mechanical radars on the F-18C or the Mirage 2000. As for the missile kit, it's fine. You get 8 total missile pylons, all of which can carry either AMRAAM Bs or Cs, and 4 on the wings that can carry AIM-9Ms. I usually just run 8 AMRAAM Cs because I don't quite find myself in situations where I need to use the 9M that often, and I get a lot more utility out of just that extra AMRAAM. There are definitely situations where I wish I had one, but given I only have 8 missiles and you can't really guarantee high probability kills with these, I would prefer to have each one of them be an AMRAAM. As for why I bring the AMRAAM C over the B, I can't really give you a definitive answer here. It is obviously personal preference. The C does turn worse and accelerates worse, and is technically better only past like 50 kilometers or something, but I feel like it retains energy and turns better, and has better long-range reach, though I haven't tested this specifically. Also has more explosives, so is a bit better at splashing multipathers. But either way, you'd probably do just as well with the Bs, maybe a little bit better in close-range jousts. As for the RWR, it's just your bog standard 4th gen digital RWR with precise direction and distance ranging from 5 to 50 kilometers, nothing really out of the ordinary. It works well enough for its BR, no extra features or doodads like MAWs or anything. It gets the same 240 countermeasures like the F-15C MSIP, definitely plenty for most matches. I only ran out in specific instances where I was getting hard focused and had to spam a lot of my countermeasures off. For secondary weapons, the only thing that I think is worth mentioning here is that the plane gets glide bombs that you can unlock at rank 1 as a modification, which is really nice for stock grinding the plane since you don't get napalm bombs for base bombing, and most people don't go for AI ground targets at this BR, so you're pretty much free to kill as many as you want. You do have to ditch half of your countermeasures for the sniper pod, and the glide bombs take up the same slot as the fuselage missiles, so once you do unlock your missiles, you can't run both at the same time. But still neat to have regardless. So how should you play this plane? Well, for the most part, this thing is pretty unremarkable in my opinion, with no particular specialty that lets it really dominate, like good turning missiles, or missile count, or good radar, or good close-range dogfighting performance. It's all just sort of okay, since effectively it's just the F-15C MSIP, but with better engines. Some people seem to really like this engine upgrade, and will swear by the fact that it's better than the F-15C or F-15JM, but while I do think it's a nice upgrade and I don't feel the loss of maneuverability from the F-15C that much, personally I don't think I would take this plane over the F-15JM or even the F-15C MSIP, since the better engines do contribute to a BR bump. Not that I'm saying that this thing needs to go down or anything, it is, in my opinion, just a straight upgrade over the F-15C MSIP, but I'm just saying that I think the F-15JM and maybe even the F-15C MSIP might perform better at their respective BRs, because I think the engines are a relatively minor improvement and not that much of a game changer. From my own experience, the improved engines allow you to have better performance in 4 main areas. Firstly, you're able to get closer to the enemies earlier than most of your team, so you get first pickings if there's an easy target, and it'll also let you flank the enemy team for better positioning. Secondly, you give your AMRAAMs much more energy on launch, meaning that they go faster and travel farther. Thirdly, you have more energy and retention to work with when notching and jousting, and just with general maneuvering. And fourthly, because of your excessive speed, you're actually able to use it quite well in missile defense, letting you both outrun and out-energy a lot of missiles even if you aren't putting that much thought into escaping them. Of these 4 points, I only really found myself feeling a significant difference for point 4 though. Getting to the battlefield early and being able to flank is nice, but in up tiers you're still not quite as good as Eurofighters and Rafales, and it usually just meant that I ended up isolated and found myself in bad situations more often since the radar is not quite good enough to give you a full picture of the development of battle, so I found myself accidentally wandering into groups of enemies that I was not able to pick up. The extra energy for the AMRAAMs can be useful if you're chasing someone who's running away or launching on someone who hasn't spotted you from around 10 kilometers since it'll get to them faster. However, it's not quite enough speed for an enemy to be unable to react to a missile launch from beyond 16 kilometers, not at least in the same way that a Falkor is able to catch enemies off guard, since at this BR most people know how to notch, and at 16 kilometers range they still have a good amount of time to react. So it's only useful when you've launched it from close enough that the enemy doesn't have as much time to react, but far enough that it has to travel a distance they're not expecting the missile to be able to travel that quickly. So in the end, I didn't really notice that big of a difference when it came to enemies not being able to notch my radar missiles in time. If you really want to guarantee a kill, you still have to get up close and in their face, at which point they've probably noticed you on their radar or RWR, which is then going to put you at risk of getting roped into a close-range dogfight or jousting match, which is not the ideal scenario for you. You are able to start with more energy with these jousting engagements compared to the F-15C MSIP, and you do retain that energy better, but if you don't want to over-G, then you will probably end up dropping throttle and speed, so I didn't find that extra speed that much useful in this scenario. It can still be useful in lower pressure medium range jousts that happen past 10 kilometers where you have time between launches to do more gentler turns and maintain your higher speed. And so the only place I felt a noticeable difference over the MSIP was in its disengaging ability, and being able to just outspeed enemy missiles. It's difficult to tell when exactly you've out-energied a missile, but you can definitely feel that you're able to outrun a lot more of them in this plane compared to some of the other ones. Sometimes if I did run into those aforementioned bad situations where my radar wasn't able to spot enemies and I have to go past the merge, because a lot of times it's not viable to slow down quickly enough to actually try and go for a dogfight, I just continue diving away. And if the enemy isn't able to react in time and lob a missile immediately after I've passed them, I have been in situations where I have been able to just straight outrun the enemy and their missiles. I do know quite a lot of people have said they like the improved engine, so perhaps I'm missing something here. Do let me know if you think there's something lacking in my assessment, but this is based mostly just on my own experiences playing the plane. Well, circling back to how you should play the F-15E, I play it mostly the same way I would play other planes at this BR. Climb to the left, launch missiles once you're close enough, on targets that are ideally not aware of you and can't see you coming. trying to launch them from as close as possible without them noticing you. I'll be honest, it's just sort of boring to play. It doesn't really lend itself to the meta of trying to get up close and launching missiles from close range that the enemies can't react in time, nor can it participate in the data linking meta of full up tiers. It's just sort of okay at its role of launching missiles from a distance and crossing your fingers that the enemy is bad and unable to notch properly in time, or getting close and risking getting stuck in engagements that you can't survive. You can attempt to lob some missiles out at the start of the match, but the chances of them killing are not very good since most people have figured out how to notch by now, and in full up tiers the Eurofighters will just be better than you at this. I did try it a few times. I only got like 1 or 2 kills from lobbing off 4 or 5 missiles, so that's not really that great of a return. In comparison, I didn't really notice the missing speed from the F-15C MSIP or F-15JM. They do take a little bit longer to get up to their speed, but they can actually go quite fast, and functionally they felt about the same. And similarly, the F-15C Golden Eagle also takes a bit more time to get up to speed, but this didn't really impact my gameplay, and it finally getting a good ASA radar means that it was finally able to complete the one piece that was missing from the long-range data link gameplay trifecta. The F-15s already had good long-range missiles and good speed, and all it really needed was that ASA radar capable of consistently data linking missiles on enemies notching from a long distance, which is much more significant of a game changer than just better engines. Now, here I might have made it out to seem like I don't really like the F-15E, and I will say it's not my favorite since it's just not that interesting gameplay-wise, but it's comfortable, it does its job, and while it can get pushed into situations where you can't do much, it's pretty capable in the typical ARB match since, once again, there are a lot of inexperienced players, or players that are just stock grinding, or premium players that its weakness of close-range engagements don't show too much, and you can kind of just fly around and sling missiles as you would in any other plane. I do think I like this plane the best out of all of the other 14.0s because of how comfortable it is overall to just play. All the other ones seem to have some sort of a deficiency that makes them kind of frustrating to play one way or another. The Mirage has a pretty poor flight model and has an annoyingly weak radar that makes it not very fun to play despite the Mikas. The F-18s are just so damn slow, and so this one just feels like a nice and well-rounded plane in comparison. I haven't tried using the F-16I in the Israeli tree, but the plane seems pretty limited by the missile count, so I'm guessing it's also pretty underwhelming. So all in all, just a very capable and consistent, but still rather boring and uninteresting plane to play from my experience. I've gotten so many 4-kill matches in this thing, and I think that limit comes down to the fact that it's really hard to guarantee kills with the AMRAAMs with this radar without getting too close that you're putting yourself in risky spots. Perhaps if I played more aggressively and took more risks, then I could get higher, but as it stands, getting up to 4 was pretty easy, but then getting any more seemed quite difficult. I have a few bits of example footage that I want to show before we get into the full matches, so let's get into that really quickly. First, a quick example of using the F-15E's speed and acceleration to be able to disengage from bad situations. One way that you can use it is at the start of the match when there's a bunch of missiles being fired at you, you can just sort of fly to the side, and especially if they've been launched from long ranges, they're going to have trouble hitting you if you continue flying side aspect for a while. Here, I'm not actually sure where most of these missiles are coming from. I can see on my RWR that they are coming from multiple directions, but very luckily, most of them are not coming from directly in front of me, so I'm going to do my best to keep the missiles either side aspect to me so that I can notch them, or rear aspect to me so that I can just straight run away from them. I really don't get an opportunity to figure out where the enemies are, but I do see that there's a JF-17 behind me, and he's launched a missile from pretty close. I do know that the thing gets R-77s, which run out of energy pretty quickly in turns, so I'm going to try and do minor maneuvers, trying to get the missile to lead me a little bit this way and that. And each time it turns after its motor's burned out, it's going to have a hard time catching up to me because it's going to bleed a lot of speed. That one could be a PL-12 because it came from a Chinese Su-30, but I'm hoping that if I can keep continuing this run, then it won't be able to catch up to me. It does seem like there was a Rafale that fired at me and is now chasing after me. And that thing does accelerate very well, but it does also have a relatively low wing rip speed, so I think I should just be able to outrun it here. And it looks like my team should eventually be able to deal with the rest of these enemies. It does seem like there may be some missiles close to me on my RWR, but it's like 5 to 7 kilometers give or take, so I'm thinking they are probably out of energy at this point. I'm gonna turn around and see if I can get this Rafale. Gonna fly off to the side just to bleed these missiles of their last bit of energy. You can still see that I didn't actually successfully notch that many of them. They're still pinging my RWR like crazy. But I was still able to escape using my speed. You do, however, want to note that if there's an enemy directly behind you and firing missiles at you, then you're likely not going to be able to survive. You do still actually want some distance between you and your enemy, because if they're right behind you, then the missile is just going to get to you while its burner's still on. I thought I had secured this kill on this J-11, but he manages to shoot my missile out of the sky before it gets to him, so I have to actually try and notch this PL-12, which turned surprisingly well. I do manage to get the notch. Unfortunately, there's another guy firing at me from in front of me, so I have to turn back out this way. And even if I didn't have to defeat that missile, the J-11 fires another one at me, which catches up to me very quickly. And this is sort of a regular problem in the F-15E. The speed makes it very easy for you to get out of position, and the radar is not quite good enough to give you a full picture of what's going on, so very often you end up in situations like this where there's just some guy in front of you that was only 5 kilometers away from me, and I only just barely get him with the ACM mode. I'm actually kind of surprised that the AMRAAM turned in for that. And here's just another guy in front of me. I'm going to fire a missile at him. He's already in the notch though, so it's unlikely that it's going to hit. And there's another guy that I didn't see. And in this sort of a situation, if you play it right, maybe you can survive, but here I'm opting to just try and run away because I cannot deal with a 2v1 close-range dogfight. And plus, I'm coming in with way too much speed anyways that I would overshoot that J-10 if I actually tried to go for a gunfight. I do manage to notch these missiles, but then, of course, in any 2v1 scenario, you cannot split your attention between the two people equally, so while there is one J-10 that's focusing me right now, the other one is also being equally as big of a threat, firing missiles from directly behind me. And so while you might survive just one of them, the other one is not going to be as easy to defeat. And even in a controlled 1v1 scenario, there isn't that much an F-15E can do. There are maybe some lesser airframes that you can dogfight, and you can maybe still try to force an overshoot because that's something that you can do in most planes. But this plane is still just very much reliant on trying to get its kills from longer range while trying to avoid the close range as much as possible, which of course gives the enemy opportunity to notch their missiles, and then you have basically no killing power. So in the scenario that all of the enemies play super optimally and notch all of your missiles, then you basically have no opportunity to get any kills in, especially in an up tier. It does still work well enough for the average ARB match, since most enemies don't know how to notch, or are dealing with multiple threats at the same time, or might just not see you coming. So there is definitely some randomness factor that plays into it, but you can also get into situations like this where one enemy does actually know how to notch, so you're forced to spend 2 missiles and he notches both of them. You fire another one, and well, let's see if this one hits. Nope, that one also missed. Let's see if we can fire another one at him. That one is probably not going to make it. That's a Su-30SM2, which I don't know if I can try and dogfight it, but it's at least better than trying to dogfight a Eurofighter, I guess, so I'm going to attempt a dogfight here. Let's try and notch these missiles first. I should probably also be flaring just in case these are R-73s. Okay, those first few are pretty easy to notch. Let's get into the rest of them and see if I can get a kill here. I'm in the defensive position, so it's not going to be very easy to force the overshoot, but I might be able to pull it off. Or if he tries to slow down with this AOA button, then I might be able to just force a rate fight, which I do maybe have a chance of winning. I don't know, I don't really know how well this plane rates, but unfortunately, because I was too focused on the dogfight, I wasn't able to pay attention to my RWR, which was showing that an F-18 was hard focusing me. Well, I actually do get another opportunity to try and dogfight an Su-30. Excellent spotting system spots him when he's 4 kilometers away. Maybe better with expert crew, but I don't really bother putting expert crew on my planes anyways. I tried zero throttling into this merge so that I wouldn't compress, but he actually goes upwards, meaning that I'm actually going to stall out earlier than him. I am sort of behind him, but his AOA button is going to let him sling off a bunch of missiles at me. I am, however, going incredibly slow, so I don't think any of these radar missiles are going to hit if I spam chaff, and if I keep flaring, then hopefully his R-73s will also miss. Now, this is not a great situation to be in either. He's basically stalled out and just drifting downwards. It's kind of funny, he's floating like a UFO. Right now all I can really do is just try and defend against these missiles because I'm not able to quite do funny stalls like him, and I'm also not pointing my nose in the right direction. I am able to turn around, but I don't want to overshoot him and give him the opportunity to chase behind me. But I'm realizing that he's going to be able to outfloat me anyways, so I'm going to pitch my nose down, see if I can gain just a bit more speed to be able to pitch up for him. And looks like he was the one to get third-partied this time, so it did work out for me here, though not quite as satisfying compared to if I had actually been able to kill him myself. This match I was not able to get that much done because it was a full up tier. A lot of the enemies just notched my missiles. So I barely just made it back to base even though I was running full fuel. Maybe I should consider using the fuel tanks, but this was a sort of a risky landing here. Only barely made it back. There's only 2 enemies left on their team, so I might be able to pull this off, but at least one of them is an F-18E, so that's going to be a bit of an issue. If he knows how to notch, then it's going to be kind of annoying to deal with him, and this other guy seems to be an F-15 of some sort, so I'm going to launch a missile from a bit of a distance. I only just took off, so I don't have quite as much speed as I'd like, but I don't want to be forced defensive from the start, so I am going to want to put some pressure on him at the very beginning. Second missile out for him, and I'm just going to go into a notch now. I should comfortably be able to get into this because the missile is going to take some time to get to me. It looks like he killed one of my missiles. And because it's an F-15C with AIM-120Cs, I know it can't be the MSIP since it only gets Bs. So I'm dealing with the Golden Eagle here, which is just going to be me but with better radar, more countermeasures, more missiles. But it is still doable because these 2 planes are fairly equivalent in a dogfight. I just need to close the distance here, to the point where the AMRAAMs can't quite turn in for the shots. He is firing multiple missiles at me at once though, so he is trying to keep me away. I do have plenty of chaff to spare, so I might as well just spam off as much as I can. Just keep the missile distracted and make sure that it doesn't actually see me. I can see his little speck, so I'm going to try and use my HMD to lock him. In this scenario, having a 70-degree horizontal limit on my radar would have been nice because then I would have been able to lock him earlier, but it still works well enough for now. I don't actually know if that missile is going to turn in time. It is an AMRAAM. Yeah, I don't think it was quite able to turn in. I'm going to try and get my nose a little closer to him before I launch this one off. I am going much slower now, which means that it should be easier to notch if I can just pull in for it. And it looks like he wasn't quite able to pull in for the notch himself. So when you're dealing with another plane that is not quite as good in the close range scenario, then maybe you do stand a chance in a 1v1 joust. I really didn't want to waste too much time playing this battle, so while it would have been wise to just RTB get more missiles back, I'm thinking maybe I can try and dogfight this F-18E, even though I only have 2 AMRAAMs. I've just launched my first one off. The goal here isn't to actually try and kill him with these AMRAAMs, though if they do get him, then that would be ideal. The goal is to make sure that he can't hard focus me and fire a bunch of AMRAAMs off at me all at once. Because he has to go defensive, I'm able to sustain this joust, come back and try and find him, and potentially get close enough that we can actually start some sort of a dogfight. I'm not going to be winning a 1 circle against him, but maybe a 2 circle I could try to attempt, especially if he's out of energy from notching a bunch of missiles. He's fired 2 off at me here, so I do need a counterfire to make sure that he doesn't keep firing at me. Now I just gotta notch these missiles and then hope that my missile was able to put him defensive long enough that I can actually get close enough to him to start a dogfight on equal footing. Unfortunately, this was not the case. If I had maybe 1 more missile to fire on him to force him defensive, then maybe we could have gotten past into the merge, but here I am very much starting on the defensive, which is not ideal. Ooh, that was a very close aim 9M. So now the only option I have left is to try and force an overshoot, which is not going to be very easy against an F-18. And quite predictably, he is able to just get on my 6. I maybe could have played that better given this scenario. Perhaps if I had just notched his missiles from longer range without counter-firing and then saved my missiles for closer range so that I could actually try and force that merge without having to start defensive, then we could have at least tried to get a dogfight out of it, but you do also have to weigh the risk of you not being able to fire back at all because he just hard focuses you and continuously keeps you in the defensive until he's able to do the same thing that just happened here. Plus, even if I did get an opportunity to find him again, I wasn't sure if my radar would be able to locate him easily enough for me to actually find him, fire at him, and then come back into the notch fast enough that I could actually avoid his missiles. I guess apart from going back for more missiles, the only real safe option to engage him here would have been to just drain him of as many missiles as possible, perhaps just by committing and then running away every single time he fires one until I know that he's out. But I mean, this was a long shot fight anyways, so it was probably about as good as I could do. This fight I flanked around the side of the map. I wasn't quite able to spot these enemies using just the search radar, but very luckily I am able to see them, whether it's because they fired a missile or got themselves spotted in some other way, but I am getting the opportunity to sling off a lot of missiles right now in a position that I don't think the enemies were expecting me to come from. One of the F-18s notches my missile, but this is more of a situation of me coming in for an attack and then leaving as quickly as I can because there's not really a point in me trying to stay here and win a dogfight. So I'm gonna try and extend away, see if I can find the enemy that's firing on me from my left. I'm not seeing anybody right now, so I'm just gonna stay in the notch. There is somebody up ahead. Oh, there's also an F-15 here. It does seem to be tracking. And this Eurofighter manages to crest this ridge, and I'm not able to notch in time, unfortunately. So you can get some work done with this plane, but it is very easy to find yourself out of position just because of how fast you are, how not so great you are in a dogfight, and how the radar isn't quite good enough to keep you fully situationally aware. So it's the same old plan as well this time. Fly high to the left, try and flank the enemy team. I wasn't really contested up here, so I'm going to be able to get some shots off on people that might not be aware. At the same time, I'm also not fully aware of what exactly is happening, so I need to keep my eyes open, since I can't rely on the radar alone. Missiles incoming. It's from a bit of a distance away, so I should comfortably be able to get into the notch here. I over-notch a little bit, but it looks like it was fine. I do have a radar contact on the edge. The missile did track, so this is a separate target. I should try to be able to get to him, and he hasn't noticed me while I've gotten really close to him, so I do my best to lead the missile as far ahead of him as possible so that it arcs around and turns in front of his face, hopefully making it harder to notch for him. Okay, there we go. I am getting a question mark that looks like it's the J-11. He is not aware. And once again, I'm finding myself in a situation where I'm not able to respond to somebody because they're way too close and I just got right up in their face because of my speed. And if I had the radar to respond, then that could have been a good opportunity to try and get a second kill there, but I only managed to spot him when he's under 3 kilometers away. So my best bet here is to just run as much as I can. This is an up tier, so I am guessing that it's an F-2A, not an ADTW, so there's a risk that he fires an AAM-4 or 3 at me. But I mean, if he does that, then I'm dead anyway, so there's not really a point in trying to figure out how to respond to that. I'm just gonna extend away. I do pick up a kill on this Su-30 that was in front of me. There's a Eurofighter that's been launching some missiles at me, but I'm not really sure where they are. So for now, I'm gonna ignore them and go after this F-16 that's below me. But I keep getting stuck in ACM mode that keeps locking the wrong guy, so it takes some time to get the missile off on him. And it's the same situation again. I'm not able to spot this Su-30 until he's 3 kilometers away from me. I'm forced to just go past in the merge, and luckily he's too distracted with this other Su-30 to actually go after me. So I am gonna try and turn back here and see if I can get the kill on him. There are some missiles coming after me, but I think these might be residuals that were fired at me from a long time ago and are just sort of drifting around. I'd rather not get hit by them, so I am going to try and notch them a little bit, but they shouldn't be too much of a threat. And this Su-30 goes down anyways, so that's the end of the match. Well, this video is already getting pretty long, so I think I'll end it here for now. I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.